Hello everyone, my name is Aaron and I'm one of the two members of Aurum Lingua games, and more specifically, I'm the programmer of A Story Told by the Stars. Since we're really proud of our work on it, we wanted to showcase some behind the scenes programming stuff with it, which might help some people on game dev and give you some insights on how and why we did certain things. As you can imagine, the dialogue was a big part of the visual novel, so I'll start by explaining how we brought it and inserted it in the game. To begin with, the text files are JSON, where we have information like an ID for each file, the name of the speaking person, the line itself, and so on. They were created with the Aurum Maker, a tool I actually developed for my final degree project. And while the tool provided some options that weren't used in our case, like the option to add answers for the dialogue, it was worth it. It allowed us to simply grab the code for the dialogue display from that same project, which sped up development quite a lot at the beginning. One thing we realized was that using the simple auto-sizing provided by Unity made the text size adjust as the letters were appearing, giving it quite an unpolished feeling. After a while, we found a solution to avoid this issue with a letter-by-letter display. First, we displayed the entire line with an invisible color, allowing Unity to adjust the text size to the correct one. Then, we disabled the automatic adjustment, removed the entire line, and started displaying it letter by letter, now visible and at the final size. Another thing we added mid-development was certain commands that would allow us to apply simple stylistic changes to the text. In our case, we can make the text bold, italic, and or center it, indicating each command with a hashtag on the speaker area. This helped when using inner thoughts or in certain scenes where you read the title of files, giving more clarity and readability to the game. To finish, one small thing we chose was different time pauses depending on if we use a comma or a dot. While at first we used the same amount of time and it looked fine already, this small detail did improve the feel of reading the text quite a lot. Accessibility is something that we're always considering, and while we couldn't possibly reasonable something like The Last of Us Part 2, we tried to implement some things to make the game more, well, accessible for different players. All of this information in-game was stored in a singleton class, which, for those of you that don't know, is something that stays permanently in the game world. This allowed us to always have certain information like how far the player had progressed, their chosen language, and so on. All this information is saved in a txt file on the Windows version, so if you've always played the game, you can actually check it out. When you open the game, it checks if this txt file exists in the folder. If it does, it loads everything from there and assigns it to the singleton. If not, it asks the player a few questions, storing the answers and creating the txt with that information. We found quite quickly that having a very first scene that is not the main menu for this helps, since it avoids the hassle of preparing different versions of the menu depending on if they have information saved or not, and we tend to use this structure for other games. The volume was handled simply with Unity's audio buses, so there's not much to say, except to remember that volume uses decibels, it's not a linear progression. The font and language, however, are much more interesting, so I'll discuss the implementation of those further. Firstly, there's two main things we need to translate, the dialogue itself and the text in the menus. For the dialogue, we use something from the Aurum Maker, which is the ability to have different versions for each JSON file. This way, depending on the language, we read either the Spanish version or the English version. For the menus, we use Unity's translation package, which was the easier implementation overall. For changing the text font, we simply use the famously hated command by all devs, find game object of type, and grab the font from each game object of text type and change it. We quickly realized, however, that some text had to stay with just one font, so we fixed it by adding an empty script to those files. Now, if the text object had that script, it will not get its font change. In A Story Told by the Stars, the game is divided in different chapters, each one being unlocked when completing a constellation. I'll talk about those later, so for now, let's focus on the chapters themselves. In short, each game chapter is divided into various scenes, each one having a certain number of events the player has to complete in order to go to the next one. We made sure that the events themselves were pretty vaguely defined, allowing us to define different interactions like a dialogue finishing or the player clicking on an object as it advances to advance the story, same as the trouble of treating them differently. We could also define a started dialogue and an end dialogue, which allow us to create automatic scenes. The actions were simple enough. The objects were specific sprites with an outline, and at first we made so that the entire object disappeared. However, late in development we wanted to add changes to the environment, so we ended up with the solution of having a child object that covered the entire actual background. So when it was removed, it would feel like it changed the background, when in reality it was removing the sprite itself. Constellations were another huge aspect, and they took a lot of time to get right. but it is something we're really proud of. Each constellation is defined by a bunch of stars, and each star has an identifier and two lists, while indicating which stars they are connected to and which stars they can connect. Click on a star, a line appears on screen, and the player must go and connect them. Once a star has all connections, they are marked as completed, and once all stars are fully completed, the constellation is displayed on screen, continuing the story. And drawing those lines, let me tell you, was the worst thing to program in the entire game. Unity, and most engines for that matter, have what we could call the wall for everything in the game itself, and then the screen for elements like the UI. Since the lines in Unity are 3D elements, this causes thousands of problems, from the lines disappearing, to them being completely flat and thus not being visible, to not being tracked correctly. It was a huge effort and a lot of tries, but thankfully in the end, we managed to make it work, and I hope it shows in the game itself. In the end, this was our first official game as a studio, and we're really happy with everything we did. This is just a small look at everything, and there's tons of stuff I could mention too, but I hope this small look was at least a little bit interesting. If you're a new game dev, I would also like to give you these two pieces of advice. Have ways of testing stuff quickly, and polish the game. For us, having the ability to test the constellations and the dialogues by themselves improve our workflow a lot, and small details like transitions between scenes, volume fading, and so on, make the game feel better and more of a complete experience, which is something a lot of people mention to us. I hope you like this video, and that you keep supporting us in our next adventures. You can check out our socials like TikTok and Twitter, subscribe to our newsletter, and check out other games on our itch.io. Thank you for watching!